Welcome to the Writing Gals. We're so excited to have you with us tonight. And tonight we're doing just kind of redoing what we did last time because our YouTube channel, for some reason, it froze and it didn't record the whole thing. And so it just kind of messed up. So we're going to redo it and we're going to talk about character building tonight. But first, we're going to go around and talk about what's been happening with us. So we'll go ahead and start with, let's see who wants to go first. Don't all jump at once. Judy.
I'll go. So this last week, I launched my latest young adult book called It Was Always You. And I tried something a little different with it. I did a short pre-order for $2.99, and then I launched it at $2.99 instead of 99 cents, and I'm just experimenting and seeing how it goes. So far, it's been pretty good. It's done better than any of my other young adult ones have done so far, and it made it to the #1 new release in young adult contemporary romance. Yay! So hopefully it'll stay for at least a few days. And then I've also been working on my 4th book in that Ridgewater High series, and I think I finally figured it out. I hope, because I've outlined it 3 different times, and it's a very different story than what I imagined in the beginning, but I like it now, so that's good.
That sometimes happens,
Yeah, happens to me a lot.
Happens to me too. Awesome. Well, that sounds good. All right. What's going on with you? Michelle? And go next.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of cool that we are redoing this episode because I literally have this same report that I did last week. My hair is just not as cute this week, so that's a bummer. But I have a really, really good chance of finishing my mermaid book in the next day or two, which I'm super excited about. And I will be getting that off to beta readers. And I will be finishing my outlining for my Saved by the Rockstar book, which is starting a new series for me, and I'm excited about. And my final chapter for Regency House Party is posting on our website on Friday. So that's kind of like a little end of a fun time for me, but an exciting step forward because we're going to be publishing those books in September. And beyond that, I'm just pulling teeth, trying desperately to get writing time any way I can with summer vacation and kids being home. So I feel like when summer's over, I'm going to be publishing books and having all kinds of fun things to report, but I don't right now.
That's awesome. I can't wait to read your mermaid one. I'm so excited for that one. All right, Amy, what's been going on with you?
I was going to say, you guys get to see the behind the scenes boring stuff that we do as authors. It's not all fun and games.
True.
Well, I was not here last week and I missed you guys, but I'm here this week. So it's exciting. And with all of our summer vacations and stuff going on, we've had to like change them up, which is why it's Tuesday and we're doing a one instead of not, because Victorine's going to the RWA, right?
Yes, that'll be next week. This week I'm just visiting family, so.
Oh, okay. Well,
yeah, boring. No.
And so I am about 7,500 words away from finishing writing Marrying a Prince. So I'm kind of like, all right, Michelle, ready, set, go. I'm going to race you to your end of your book. I was actually writing right before I came here. I was writing right before I came here. So I was like, I got to get more words in. I got to get done with this book because I'm just ready for it to be over. And
tomorrow.
You and me, we're going to finish tomorrow. That means I have to end this podcast and go do some more writing. So I can, because I can do like 5,000 in a day, but I think more than that might be a kind of pushing it. But so I'm finishing that book and then I'm going to release it probably in about a week and a half. And then I'm going to, now you have to tell us all what that was, Victorine.
My daughter dropped a pair of scissors.
Oh, it was just like, what? That's what we saw. So then once I'm finished with that book, I have one more book in that series I'm going to write called Marrying a Spy, which my husband helped me plot out. He was very excited, all because we have a dentist at our church, and he was telling my husband how I should write a story about a dentist. And I was like, well, you're going to have to give me more to go off of. So then my husband came up with this whole plot where she's the dentist and then she has to pretend to marry a spy to like flush out her dad. So I'm kind of excited about that one. That's going to be fun. Me and my husband plotted the last of my billionaire books too. We plotted Fixing the Billionaire together. So it's kind of fun. And it's fun to watch him like think of all these ideas. And I'm like, yeah, that's not really going to work. Or no, they need more tension or they need something more pushing them apart. And we actually got frustrated on Fixing the Billionaire because I was like, that's not going to work. Will you stop? You got like, this is why it's not going to work. So he comes up and he's so funny because he tries to write dialogue. And I'm like, yeah, I would never put that in a book. Like, he's like, yeah, and you can have her say blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, no, she wouldn't say that. Anyway, but I'm not going to work on that one. I'm going to work on my rapid release for the 3 YA books. So one of the number 1 I have written is done. And then I have to write 2 and 3. So then I can, well, actually, I'll probably write 2 and then start releasing and then write 3 while I'm releasing the other 2. So I'm pretty excited to see how that all plays out. So lots of stuff going on. Yeah.
Yes. And we also have.
Yes. Hold on. And then the Midwest Conference, if you're planning on going, it's in Kansas City, Missouri. And this is the last week you can get the early bird special. So go to the Writing Gals and we Facebook group, and we will post the link on there so that you guys can all come. 3 of us are teaching. So me, Victorine, and Michelle will be there and we'll be teaching. So make sure you come. You can learn more from us than you learn on our.
That's right. Come to our classes. It'll be great.
Awesome. You can meet us in person and see how tall or short we are. We're all pretty average height, so.
Yeah.
And you'll be the cool kids because you'll be, Writing Gal fans.
That's right.
Yes. Regulars.
We'll have ribbons for your little name tags. So
awesome. Great. Well, I'm not doing much. I'm just working on my last billionaire book. So I'm still plugging away at that. I kind of got stuck a little bit, so I have to push through a hard part. So, but we all get to those points, don't we, in our books? So that's what's been going on with me. All right, so let's just dive into this, talk about character building, and we'll start with what can you do to make sure your characters are not flat?
I always write about curvy women myself.
So I had a book where I wrote, she wasn't, what did I say? She wasn't curvy, but she wasn't skinny or something like that. And so it made it sound like she was just a block.
We were like, that doesn't sound at all attractive or feminine, Amy.
She was just, I can't, then imagine it's like rectangle person. Pretty much, that's how I wrote it. I was like, oh yeah, okay, so maybe I need to change that because that's not giving the best image of my character. But I guess maybe what we should ask first is, what is a flat character? How do you know if your character is flat?
That's a great question.
Like you could say, how do you avoid it? I would say a flat character is somebody where all of the situations are happening to them. So like they are not doing anything to like make any plans, good or bad. They're just always just kind of absorbing everything that's going around. They're almost like they're your little like game piece that you're just moving through the board, and everybody else is doing the active stuff, and they're just like do to scene to scene to scene to scene. I would say that.
Yeah, and to me, a flat character is somebody who they really don't have a personality. You really can't imagine, a lot about them. You don't know a lot of their background. You don't know, their wants and desires. They're just there, and it's harder to make them come alive because you don't have a great idea of who they are.
Yeah, if you could put any character's name on their dialogue or action and it doesn't change anything, then that means that they're pretty boring and all the same, which is not a good idea. Yeah. You want readers to be able to know that this is how someone would react, or this is what someone would say, just because they feel the force of that character's personality. They know that. Yep.
Yeah, another thing is to always give your characters goals and things they're working towards. give them faults and flaws, and try to make them, don't follow the stereotypes that we see, give them more of a personality. And a great way that I learned how to like figure out character personalities was by reading a personality book a few years ago. And like the one I read was called Personality Plus by Florence Littauer, I think. And so that was just helpful, in life in general, to understand the people in my life and kind of like, okay, yeah, that's why they're that way. And I understand like they have that thing. So they probably have that thing too. And usually I'm right, based on what I learned from that book. And so it's just great to like figure out characters really quickly, because you can say, I want them to have this personality. And then you automatically know that like all these different traits go with that personality and make it a lot easier to just get your characters started. So that's.
And I think what goes along with a flat character are characters that are overly done to the point where it's hard as a reader to imagine yourself. Because your goal, or at least my goal as an author, is that people can read my books, but you want to feel like you're sort of that character going through that emotion and excitement and sadness, all those things. And there's some characters that are so over the top written that I can't get into it. And I'll probably be blasphemed because of this, but I could not get through the 5th Harry Potter because I wanted to smack Harry the entire time. So he was not a flat character, but to me, he was not a character that I could get involved with. And I just was like, oh my gosh, he is so mean to all of his friends. He's whiny and crabby. And I know that's what a 15-year-old boy is like, but I don't want to live like a 15-year-old boy. So I have shut that book and I have not read any of the other Harry Potter since then. And everybody I talk to when I tell this to them, they're like, oh, well, you just have to get through that. You just have to get through because it gets better. And I'm like, but that to me is not a book I want to read, where it's just get through it. Just pretend you're with this character and go along with it. So I think that as where you don't want flat characters, you also don't want characters that are just unrelatable. Now, you could have a story about a serial killer, but you could love that serial killer so much and their quirky personality that you're okay taking this journey with them, even though they're our serial killer, Yeah. So there's just some, so when we say don't write flat characters, we're also not saying now shove all this ridiculous stuff into this character, because that's going to make them interesting. When really it could just make them really annoying to the reader.
My best example of a flat character versus a character that comes alive is Phantom of the Opera, because the Phantom is such an interesting and dynamic character, and Raoul is the love interest in the story, but everybody's like, I don't want her to end up with Raoul. He's just so boring. You don't know anything about the guy, but the Phantom is the main character. He's so much more dynamic, and you want your characters to be likable. And even though he's a murderer, everybody likes the Phantom because he's so much more interesting than Raoul.
Yeah, I think a lot of it's about their backstory too.
Yes.
That definitely affects it. Sorry, my phone just started ringing on my computer. Okay. Don't know why that wouldn't happen. Anyway, and also I think it's important to also show that there are, like, we have different sides of ourselves. So like I'm one way with my like close friends and family, and I'm a little different when I'm with people that I don't know. And just kind of show that we can all be different in different situations. And like an example of that, in my last book, it's about this guy named Noah, who he is in Meet Me There also. And he was like the villain in that book. And like, I did not like him at first until I got to know him a little bit better. But then, and so then in this book that I just released, like I ended up like him so much more because I found out why he was the way he was. And so it's important to understand their backstory, and just there's always two sides of the story, and the villain is the hero of his own story. So yeah, just the more you get to know them and the more you let your readers get to know them, usually the better they'll be. As long as you give them good reasons, unless they're Harry Potter in the 5th one. So
And then you'll
Yeah.
lose Amy.
Yeah.
So I kind of wish I could just remember everything I said last time, and I can't. So, but as we've been talking, I remembered I did a class on dialogue for a couple of writers' conferences, and I spent the first half of the class actually talking about developing your character's personality so that when you wrote their dialogue, you knew what they were going to say. And so I will find a way to put that on our Facebook group so you guys can look at that PowerPoint, because there's a whole lot of stuff that I pulled in to kind of help you to flesh out the personality of your characters. So I'll just go ahead and add that as like a little bonus resource to go with our podcast tonight.
That's great.
But I do think I always like to write my characters in a way that I feel like they could walk into my house and sit at my kitchen table and we could talk. And I would know them and they would seem like a real person. And if they don't live in my head like a different character, like their own person, then it means that I need to get to know them better. And I usually get to know them better as I'm writing the story. And we did touch on that last week, that I do most of my character building, fleshing them out and turning them into real people during my editing. Because by the end of the book, I know who they are a lot better. And so I can go back through the story and make sure that I've pulled out all those pieces of personality and that I'm highlighting them and showcasing them so that the reader is able to see all of those bits and pieces and tangled knots that make up a human being.
Perfect.
I think as well with avoiding flat characters. So I experienced this with my first rewrite of my first ever book I was going to write. I wrote it and then I needed to change it. So then I changed it. I wrote it again. And I realized that I had written a flat character because it was just her going through the entire story, not really doing anything. And so one of the ways that I avoided a flat character was to bring in another character to help balance her out. And I think of it as the Watson and Sherlock syndrome. Can you imagine watching a movie or reading a Sherlock book with just Sherlock? I think that would be very overwhelming as a reader. So that would, to me, be a character that is an overactive character. And then can you imagine if we were reading just a Watson story? That would be more of a flat, boring character. But you put the two of them together, and together they make the Sherlock Watson dynamic duo that kind of becomes the one character, where you have this really super genius who's very intelligent, but he has Watson that balances him out. So either you need to have a Sherlock Watson character who has both of those dynamics, or for me, it was just bringing another character. And to me, that's always like the funnier, because your main character always has to be kind of more the serious one, because they're the one that has to grow and become a better person by the end of the story. So they're not as fun. So bringing in like for me in a romance, it's a quirky aunt or a quirky grandma or a cute kid or a funny. I love older people because you can get them to say whatever and they don't care, because old people don't care. They're like, whatever, I'm gonna say that, and that's the end. So I love bringing those types of people in to help balance out the characters. And then also in romance, it's normally you have your main character. You have two main characters, and your guy is helping balance out your girl, and your girl's helping balance out your guy. So that's really helpful. But if you're writing a story that it's maybe just one person, it's helpful to have that Watson to bring in to kind of help balance out that main character.
Yeah, that's a great idea. All right, does anybody here use a character Bible, and what is that?
I don't. I kind of make my character Bible as I go. I think it's weird and this is just me, I think it's weird to sit down and be like, my character went to this high school and played this sport and eats this food and thinks this is her favorite and did it. It just feels so fake to me. Like I can't do that. I write as I go. So if my character Bible is they like this, or their color is this, so that their eye color doesn't change throughout the book, or their hair color is this. But that's pretty much what I do. I guess I just don't get that involved in my character so much. And it's third person too, so I don't think it's as in their head as you would with like a first person book. But a character Bible is just where you write down the things that they like and you keep track of like all of that stuff. I don't know. I don't do it.
I
Or at
don't use a
least to the
character Bible.
in-depth as some people.
Yeah, I use Pinterest to gather inspirational things for me, like pictures or quotes that kind of represent their, you know, morality or their point of view, or um, different objects or trinkets that kind of represent them or places that they've lived or live. And that's kind of like a little bit like my character Bible, and sometimes I'll go back through and just look through it to remind myself who they are. But I think that anybody who wants to use a character Bible, I can definitely see how they'd be useful. But I think you also need to balance the amount of time you spend on a character Bible with how much use it's going to be for you. So some people get really intense about it, and that's kind of what Amy touched on, where you can pull things from the internet that have you answer 144 questions for your character, or just go through all this insane amount of information, and they want you to do it for every character. And first of all, you don't need to know all of your characters that well. And the amount of time you need to spend developing your character should correlate with how much screen time they get in the book, or at least the importance that they have on the plot and the main characters. But I also think you need to understand that some things matter and some things don't. So think about your story and think about what your character, your main character's goals are and what they need to be struggling with and striving for. And what is it that you need to build in them to make those happen? So if they need to be have a jealous personality, for example, then in their character Bible, put down the things that number one, help them to develop that personality, what happened in their past, and then how does that come out? Is it something that only extreme circumstances make them show their jealousy, or is it something that comes out in quirks all the time, or those are the kinds of things that are pertinent to the plot and pertinent to the character, and I think those things are important. I don't necessarily think that knowing, their favorite brand of soda is always important, but it might be. Maybe that is something that picks up throughout the story, and the character uses it. And I have a brother-in-law, and we tease him that he gives people love sodas. Like it's his way of showing affection for people. He'll remember what kind of soda they like, and then he'll swing by and just like give them their favorite soda. So we tease him that he gives love sodas to people. So maybe your character gives love sodas, and so you need to remember what everybody's favorite flavor of soda is. If it matters, then put it in there. If it doesn't matter, it's always, as a writer, what you're spending your time on, and if it is going to pay off in story quality for you. So
I agree.
Yeah, and I think that I haven't done one before, but now it's like my series is getting bigger and bigger. I need to make at least a sort of character Bible just so I can remember all of their first names and last names and hair and eye color and a little bit about their personalities and different things. Because if I'm going to keep it going, there's going to be a lot of characters, and I need a sheet to just go down and make sure I'm not using the same names over and over again, even for little side characters that, their name is just mentioned. I gotta make sure that I'm not naming every person in their class the same thing. So there are definitely good times to keep it, and especially with the series, I think.
I agree with the series. And if we're talking about logistics of Bible dictionary or character dictionaries or character Bibles, there are files you can use on Scrivener where you can actually build different files for your characters. So it's right there on your open workbook, and you can reference it anytime. Some people like to make a binder, and they'll have a different sheet for every, or space or tab for every character. There are spreadsheets you can download that help you. You can fill things in. You can have a separate Word document. I mean, there's all different ways people can you can do it. And so a lot of people just have to figure out like what works for them. And sometimes you might have to experiment a little with it. And you might find that you're like us and it doesn't necessarily matter to you that much. And maybe you can just scribble down, name spellings and eye colors and call it good. So
Yep. I just kind of take notes as I go in a separate Word document. And if I kind of discovery write my characters. And so as I go, I'm like, oh, she really loves music. So I'll jot that down. Or, oh, she had this happen in her past. So I'll jot that down just to make sure that I can have just a brief overview of my character. But I do it as I write and discover what my characters are all about. All right, so what's a character arc and how do you create one in your story?
So a character arc is like the growth of your character from one point to another point at the end. And usually a good way to create one is to give your character flaws at the beginning and give them things that they need to work on in their life, and then also give them like different things that happen in the story to help them overcome that eventually.
Perfect. Yes. What I like to do is I like to think of, okay, where do I want my character to be at the end? And so then I'll start them out in a weaker position or in a different position so that they can grow throughout the story and end up in a different place.
So I have a question for you, Victorine. So obviously in any romance, since we all write romance, the end is they're in love. So how do you get more descriptive than I want them to be in love?
Well, most of the time what I'll do is like with Acting Married, I had my main male character have this big, huge hang up because of something that had happened in his past. And he was actually drinking because he was in pain because of this thing that had happened. And in the end, he had to overcome that, putting himself down because of what he did. He hated himself because of that. I had to have him overcome that. I also had to have him realize that family was more important than anything else in his life. And at the beginning of the book, so I knew I wanted family to be most important at the end. So at the beginning of the book, I made him really nonchalant towards relationships. I made him aloof, and I made him not want to get himself emotionally involved in anybody else's life.
So maybe we could say the story arc is that they fall in love, but then each character has to have their personal character arc that they go through. That's what's keeping them pushed apart and pulled together. And then at the end, they need to overcome whatever it is. My last billionaire book, Fixing the Billionaire, it was a redemptive story for him. So he was a billionaire that was going around. He lost his daughter to cancer, and he was going around to hospitals donating money, paying off people's medical bills because he was trying to redeem himself for being so focused on his career that his daughter passed away when he wasn't there. So that was kind of a difficult one because you needed to make sure that his actions, you couldn't just have him be like, I'm sad about my daughter, and I'm in love with you. And I'm sad about my daughter, but I'm in love with you. So you had to really play that he has to be distant from everybody because his character arc was not complete until the end when he was able to forgive himself for what he did and move on and then be and accept the love that was trying to be there. So you have to be careful with character arcs, that as exciting as it is to have romantic stories that you need to, or romantic incidences, you need to make sure that they're true to that character and where that character is on their arc in terms of where the story arc is at.
Well, and usually you can't you can't get to your happily ever after until your character arc has completed, till you have finally gotten everything else in a row, and then the happily ever after comes.
Yeah,
Yes.
and I was going to add to that in romance especially, the two main characters' arcs need to actually push the other one towards their resolution, if that makes sense. So that if they hadn't met each other, if they hadn't been forced into each other's life, that they would never have completed that journey to where they were needing to be. And that's that's where the love and connection and intimacy happens, is when they're bumping against each other and making their character arc move forward. And I think it exists the same way in most genres, actually, just to a different degree. And also, it might be spread out amongst different plots and subplots through your story. So if you might have a main plot and several subplots, and maybe not all character arcs are going to be pushing towards the main arc, but they will be pushing towards the subplots. And so character arcs always intersect and push against other characters. And if they don't, then you're leading your story or your readers down paths that are never going to be resolved or connect and come together into one big conclusion.
Yes.
And I would say in romance as well that the accumulation of when the character arc is fulfilled, I don't know, it's pretty common, but it's when they have a conversation with their wise Gandalf in the story that makes them realize, oh no, I can let this all go and I can love this person. We're watching this TV show. If you guys haven't seen it, it's on Hulu. It's called Life in Pieces, and it is hilarious. But it has Colin Hanks in it, Tom Hanks's son. Anyways, and there's this, it's like 4 stories told in this like 20-minute video each episode. And Colin Hanks is like trying to be the best man at his brother's wedding. And the other family was like, well, they have like, and it was totally like making fun of this like romantic, like has this always happens where they're like, well, you love him. And then he's like, well, go to him then. And he's like, I will. And then like the next scene shoots to here's the knock on the door, and the guy like his brother opens the door, and here's Colin Hanks in like the rain, like I was, I'm gonna fight for you, and I'm gonna be your best man. And I was like, that's so like cliche and funny, but that's so true, because that's what happens in romance. It's like that moment when they have that conversation with the person that they trust the most, that they say, yes, you love him, go after him, and then they go after him, and then it's the end of the story. So
that's funny.
Anyways.
All right. So when you're describing your character, how do you avoid like a laundry list of this is what they look like and this is how tall they are and what their hair color is and stuff like that?
I just give certain things. So I say they have dark hair, or it's curly, or they have dark. I normally list an eye color and their hair color, maybe their height, but I don't list it like off. I say, oh, she brushed her dark, her brown hair behind her ear. Right there, we know she has brown hair. Or he saw her blue eyes and they were dazzling. I'd maybe give 1 or 2. I always find it interesting. And as much as I talk about J.K. Rowling and her 5th Harry Potter book, somebody was saying that was very like aloof about her descriptions about people, which is why when they were going to do the Broadway, they had Hermione that she could be played by African-American women instead of, because everyone thought, no, she's white. But if you go back and you read it, it doesn't talk about that. It just talks about her frizzy hair. And that she found one piece of each of the characters that she focused on. Like Ron was his red hair, right? And Hermione, it was frizzy. And what was Harry? Was Harry his scar, or was he his glasses?
Maybe? Glasses and scar, yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, they picked one like physical marker, and that's how you kind of relate it to the character.
So It's interesting. When any of us meet anybody else, there are certain things that we all take in immediately, and I think that what the author doesn't give us in those areas, we're going to fill in. I think readers want to know gender, and they want to know basic like height and basic descriptions. And if we don't tell them their hair color in the beginning of the book, and then we tell them halfway through, the reader might have filled in a different hair color for them. And it just like, this person seems like a brunette to me, and you're trying to tell me that they have red hair, and it just throws them right out of the story. So I think it is important to get, some of those basics in. I mean, some people would say, well, what does their hair color matter? And I think in romance it matters. I think in a lot of other genres, hair color might not matter. And so you might be able to be a little bit more literary in which descriptions you give, and you might be able to just talk about like the curve of their nose or the set of their shoulders and leave it at that. But in romance, readers want to know what these people look like, because so much is based on physical attraction. And so you need to give it to them. And so the way to do it without doing a laundry list is dropping a few things here and there. But I like to do it in 2 different point of views. I like to be able to have some of the information given in the hero's point of view and some in the heroine's. It might be a little bit about them and it might be a little bit about the other. So maybe she mentioned something about how, you know, she always has to wear sunglasses because her blue eyes are you know, really sensitive to the sun. And it's not like I looked in the mirror at my blue eyes. I think, you know, everybody knows not to do that kind of thing. So find some interesting way to mention characteristics and then have the other character think about or notice or remark on ones that you didn't mention before, but that are still important. And a lot of times you don't have to say they were 6'2". You can say, you know, he looked down at the top of her head when they stood next together. And then the reader just gets the idea, okay, you know, he's taller than her. And that's good enough for them. You know, and so just think about how you're going to be able to relay information in interesting ways. And the reader just kind of laps them up, pulls them out, and makes up this person in their head.
Yeah.
I would also say too, just make sure that you understand genes and how they work, because if you give your people very, very a lot of people in your book very like rare, like red hair is not super common. This happened to me in my story. So I get giving everybody red hair, and people were like, and I would focus on the fact that they had red hair. And so people were like, are they related? Because red hair is not that common, and you kept focusing on the fact that they had red hair. So it almost, the readers want to piece puzzles together. They want to figure things out. You know, have you ever gone to a movie and you're watching it and you're like, oh, I know who the killer is. And then you lean over to whoever you're watching with and you're like, it's the killer. This is the killer because I figured it out. Like, so all readers want to figure this out. So if you start shining lights on certain parts that aren't that important, then make sure that you have a reason why you're shining a light on that. So if they have red hair and everybody has red hair, you know, is this going to be found out, oh no, we're actually related, and this is taking a whole different turn for the story. Or like I remember when Victorine we were doing one of our critique groups and you were talking and you talked about something and like they were eating, and I was like, are they allergic to it or something? Because it just felt strange that you had shined a light on just that part. And you were like, well, no, I was just trying to add some more like physical descriptors in or something like that. Yeah. So you just have to be careful on like, because if you're going to focus on the fact that this girl's eating strawberries, then people are going to be like, is she going to die from this strawberry? Is she going to choke from this strawberry? But if nothing happens, then they're going to be like, well, why did you just point out that the character is eating a strawberry?
Because I must have been hungry when I was writing. My characters are always eating. They always eat every chapter.
Oh, we always get hungry after we hear Victorine's stories.
All right. So how do you show the personality of your characters? How do you make that come out? Don't all answer at once.
I always like to give them funny quirks, and I like to be able to show that they think a little bit different than other people, or that they react a little bit different. And I actually had an example in my dialogue class where my critique group said, no, this person would never say this. And I was like, oh my gosh, you're right. And so from then on, when I wrote that character, I would always stop and think, okay, this is what a normal person would say here. What would she say? Excuse me. And so I guess constantly examine your first instinct and then reach deeper and give them something a little bit more. And this can all be fixed in edits. That's why I like editing so much. And I like to show it through dialogue. So much personality can be portrayed through dialogue. Physical gestures, because everybody tends to have little tics. Like I think you can all, just from watching the writing gals, you can see what some of our own personal little tics are. And we all do them. And by watching us week after week, you can kind of see that's just part of our personality. We don't, come on guys, I watch you guys too. We all do these things.
Now you're making me self-conscious. You gotta stop nodding when people talk.
Yeah, don't watch me that closely.
But you know that about people that you know in your real life too. You know the funny little things that you do. Like my mother-in-law used to sit and she'd shake her right leg when she was bored. Like it would just start shaking. And you know, you don't have to do something that's going to knock the reader out of the story. But you know, those are kind of like funny little things that we all we can build into our characters if it has, you know, something revealing about it. So if someone, you know, has a tendency to raise their eyebrows a lot, then maybe it makes them seem like a cynical person. You know, like think of things that relate. You're totally distracting me right now, Judy. So you can find all those little things that relate to what you've built them to be and use it, you know, figure out how to portray it to the reader. And like I said, I like to do it in edits, and there's certain things that I lose when I'm in the nitty gritty part of getting the story down. I lose the character's personality a lot. In my last billionaire, I had a sassy Southern girl, and halfway through the book, she stopped being sassy and Southern. Oh well, that's a problem. And so I had to go back through and add some sass and add some South, and it worked out great in the end. But that's what you got to do, is make sure that if you start something at the beginning, that it carries all the way through, because that's what really builds them in the reader's mind, is if it's consistent.
I do have to say though that there are some people who mistake quirks for personality. And I think for main characters, you can give them quirks, but be very careful with how you do them, because again, they can annoy your reader. Major big quirks are more for side characters that are there for comic relief, I believe. If you give your main character too many quirks, that the reader's just like, this is obnoxious. They need to stop doing that. I can't handle it. And so you need to just play very careful about that, and giving them, like, so in my Finding Love with the Billionaire, she had a quirk where she would repeat like facts in her head to kind of calm her down. And it was a quirk that she started with, but about a quarter of the way through, I kind of helped her get over it. And so she didn't have it as much, and it wasn't as prevalent, because I kind of use it as a way of showing that she was getting more comfortable with her situation where she was at, because I couldn't keep it up. I was like, oh my gosh, this is so annoying, and I don't want to annoy my readers. So be careful that personality does not necessarily mean quirks, and you could just irritate your reader, or you'll just irritate me, because I'll be like, and I'm closing the book because I can't handle the character. So
Yes.
be careful about that.
Yes.
You can show it with action so easily too. Like personality would be shown well with somebody who, and not necessarily a positive trait, but who interrupts, and that's, you know, something that they can do. It can be somebody who you know, is impatient. You know, that's a personality trait that you can show quite easily. Like maybe they're always like jumping up and moving forward with stuff without thinking it through. Maybe they're, you know, quick to shut doors or end relationships. I mean, there's all kinds of ways you can show different personality traits, but beyond just like quirks and dialogue. I mean, just think about what the people in your life do, that shows you what their personality is, and they just become a student of human nature. I think writers all need to be that way all the time, and kind of fill our pockets with what real people do. And then when we're trying to find a way to express it, we can pull not an actual person, but, you know, bits and pieces from what we've seen and experienced, and plug them into characters where we need them.
Do you feel like quirks are kind of hard to do for a main character, just because we spend so much time in the sequel of a story plot or a scene? Because you use quirks, or you use actions that people are doing to describe how they're feeling without actually saying how they're feeling. But when you're in the head of the main character, you're having the action, and then you have that sequel where they go back and they analyze what they just saw. And maybe that's why quirks are harder to work with like the main characters. Do you think that maybe? Because then if you were showing a quirk, like she was nervous, so she did this quirk, because then she's going to go back and she's going to think about, or she's going to have to process what had just happened in the sequel part of the story. Maybe that's where it becomes overbearing to have a quirk and all that sequel stuff at the same time.
Well, I think it depends on how you use it, and I think the quirk definitely has to be built into you have to use it with a specific purpose. You can't, because otherwise it would get old and grating. For example, on my Saved by the Rockstar book, I am working on making a character, my heroine, have agoraphobia. And one of the ways that she copes with that is by listening to music, using sound canceling headphones and listening to music, or earbuds. And so for her, when she gets nervous, one of her quirks is she reaches in her pocket and feels her earbuds. And it's not necessarily something that everybody's going to see. Maybe she sits there and kind of plays with them in case she needs them. Like, she just needs to have them in her hands in case she needs it, right? And so for her, that would become a quirk, and it would be something that would show the reader she's getting nervous with this situation, or something about this is starting to make her feel like she might have a panic attack, and it would be something that would also show her strength and her ability to overcome, because maybe she still touches it, but she doesn't use them, or maybe she loses them and she keeps feeling them missing, but she makes it. And so it all needs to be a quirk that shows something meaningful and helps us to deliver the personality of the character, but also their struggle and their growth. And that's what I think is great about quirks, if you use them the right way.
Sounds good. All right. How long does it take to flesh out your characters so they come through strong in your writing? Does it take a long time for you guys to flesh those out?
So I want to know, is the word flesh or flush?
Flesh.
Is it flesh?
How do you build your character? Flesh them out.
I was like, that's
Does
such a
it take a
weird
long time?
word. Not just, yeah, anyway, sorry. I agree with what Michelle says, because she's talking and she's not unmuted.
I was gonna say, it's from the phrase like putting on flesh. It means like making them fat.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I always thought like flushed out, like flushed out. I don't know. It's late. I agree with Michelle. It's normally through writing the first couple of chapters that I get that more. And sometimes I'll be writing and I'll be like, oh, I didn't know that they were going to do that. So look, they're doing that. So I don't plan as much. I just start writing. I normally have the idea in my mind of where they're going to be at their lowest low. And that's when they're going to come into each other's lives. And then I kind of just feel them out from there. Then once I get a good handle on it, then I go back and make sure that the first couple of chapters portray that as I get to know them better. It's mostly, to me, through writing.
Yeah, I do the same thing. Discover my characters.
Yeah, me too. Takes me a few chapters, and then usually I get a good idea.
Mm-hmm. So how do you avoid writing a Mary Sue character?
I remember this question. So you wanted us to talk about what a Mary Sue character was before we got started talking how not to write her. And a Mary Sue is somebody who's just too good to be true. She's perfect and sweet and always kind and always doing the right thing, and doesn't have any major flaws that make her believable or somebody that you can connect with. And so the best way to avoid writing Mary Sue characters is to give them flaws, but give them meaningful flaws, but also something that it make them a little bit irreverent sometimes, make them, a little bit quirky. So like I was reading Harlequins from the 1950s when I was a teenager, because they were clean romances still. And one of the things that always struck me is that they showed a character's morality, or that she was a good person, by how good she was with things around the household. That she always washed her dishes and put them away after eating, and she kept her clothes neatly pressed, and she, her everything about her was neat and clean and tidy and just the way it should be. And that in that time period showed that she had good character, that she was a good person. And I always think it's funny because that's obviously changed. Society has changed, and the way that we, view people and view women has changed. So we don't have to have these perfect little characters anymore for them to be likable or for them to be sympathetic characters. And I think that that's what is really important, is that we can see that you can have a character that has flaws or quirks or things that make her, you know, different, and she's still somebody that readers will like. So many people who write Mary Sue characters are trying to make the readers like them, and that is not actually what makes readers like characters. They want somebody that seems real and somebody that they can connect with and see themselves in or feel sympathy towards. So, yeah, I think I've talked enough about that.
Well, and I agree with that. But if you do want to write a Mary Sue character, if you do want them to be really perfect in every way, a way to make them likable is to show why they are the way they are, what in their backstory made them feel like they have to be perfect all the time. Was there some sort of abuse that they went through, or a major life event that happened that made them think they always need to be perfect? Did they make a mistake once and someone got hurt because of it, and now they always need to be perfect and never mess up ever again? Just, if you do want to write a character who is perfect all the time, give us a good reason why, and we can like her a lot better.
Good. You can also make their life fall apart so that something happens and they're not perfect anymore.
True.
See, now I took the opportunity with my last book, Marrying a Billionaire, because I had her hidden pregnancy as the biggest thing keeping them apart. And I just made Reed the best guy in the world. And I loved every minute of it. I was like, here's this guy. He's got all the money in the world. And he is just going to be every girl's fantasy and be completely doting on this girl. And I loved it. And it's my favorite story to date of the ones I've written, because he's just so nice to her. And he's just so giving and kind. And I was like, I can write him that way because I don't have to create any tension any other way, because her pregnancy is what's pushing them apart. And she's so incredibly flawed that it was just kind of nice to be able to write more of a, I don't know, what would you call him? A Mary Sue dude. It was fun to write, but you have to make sure that there's enough going on in the story that is pushing the conflict, because if they're too good, then that's where it kind of dwindles.
Well, I was going to say, I think in romance, the whole point is having a guy who's too good to be true, and especially emotionally, because it's women want to experience a man who is perceptive and who connects and listens, and that's one of the things that we always get around to, having our heroes really listen and really try to connect and be perceptive and do these grand gestures. And we all know that a lot of times men struggle with that. Not all men, and I'm not going to make generalities, but I think that has been a theme in romance since forever, and it's something that we all want to see in our heroes. If a hero was ever somebody who didn't do those things, nobody would like him. You guys agree with that? Like if a hero didn't listen or didn't try to connect with the female's feelings or do really nice things for her, readers would not like him at all.
Yeah, exactly right. All right, I'm going to skip to Michelle's favorite question because we're getting low on time. How do you research/prepare for writing characters of different color, nationality, disability, and make them come alive authentically?
Did you just let me? Okay, so
It's for you, Michelle.
I do love this question. I spent a lot of time thinking about this, and there's a lot of pressure on the writing world do this well, and rightfully so. We need to do this right. I mean, the thing that we all have a difficult time doing is that we can all only be one person, right? I can only be a 38-year-old Caucasian woman in the South. Like, that's part of my identity, and I can't be another person. And so anytime I write anybody else in my book, I need to be aware that there are chances that I might, write something that somebody might take offense to or be hurt by, and I need to be respectful. And I think that's what I mostly want to say, is that it all comes down to being respectful of people's races, of people's religions, of people's cultures, and all these things. But I also think that when you're looking for sensitivity readers, which a sensitivity reader is somebody that is used to help an author understand if they have portrayed a character in a way that is going to be acceptable by that group that character might represent. And one of the difficult things about that I think is difficult about using sensitivity readers is that there are so many facets to any human being that it's going to be difficult to find a sensitivity reader to represent one group. It's going to be because everybody is, even if they are, for example, the same race or the same gender or the same religion, they're all going to have a multitude of different factors that make up who that person is. And I think that right in and of itself is the best way to write a character, is to make sure that you're not just putting up, this stick figure that you think represents this one thing, that they need to become a whole person, and that whole person is so many different parts and pieces. And you can pull those in from different people that you know in your life. Take the time to really immerse yourself in people that help you to understand all those bits and pieces, and then put them together into who your character is. And it's kind of interesting because I am, in my mermaid book, I do have a character who is a Black male who is a Vietnam vet. Well, is he Vietnam? He's a veteran. He's not Vietnam. I just said that because I was talking to a Vietnam vet tonight, but he's not from Vietnam. He is disabled, and he is homeless, and he is living in the South. And so it's like all these different things that I need to be careful that I'm doing them respectfully, and also that I'm doing them appropriately. But I think because of all the different things that come together to make him who he is, I think that he is somebody that readers are really going to love and appreciate. And I love him. He's one of my favorite characters because he's so wise and he's so steady. He's like a rock steady character, which it seems really at odds from where he's come from. And he's just emerging and evolving into this really, really cool character. And so there are certain parts of him that make up him that I'm going to reach out to some people and ask them, say, did I do this well in your mind? But let's all try to also be kind to authors. I think there's a lot of negativity out there in the world on this subject, and just understand that most authors are trying to create something new, and it's fiction, and you can't ever find one person that represents everybody. That's like, you can't find one Baptist that is the same as every other Baptist out there in the world, just to pull some random thing, and so let's I don't know, I could just go on. What do you guys think about this?
I would have to agree with you, Michelle. My worry is that as a society, we've become so concerned, not and equal right to be concerned, but to the point where anybody is too scared, or everyone's too scared to even write it. And so the diversity in the books, instead of growing, is diminishing. And to the point where it's like, I think for me as an author, I want to stay away from a stereotype. So, like what you're described would be a stereotype, a Vietnam vet. That doesn't mean that his character doesn't have place, but or you're going to write a maid character. So you write a stereotypical what you would think. Well, let's change that up. Why couldn't the maid be a white woman or an older guy? Like, why does it have to be just, or, I'm going to write this ethnicity and they're only going to have that job. Like they could be the dentist of the story. So to me, it's not so much about worrying about that, but making sure I'm breaking the mold of what we stereotypically would think, or in stories, that's what we've been shown a lot is what's stereotypical. Because and I would say for me personally, and I haven't experienced a ton, but if somebody else of a different gender or race tried to write a 32-year-old white woman, I don't know if I'd get that offended by what they had. So sometimes I think the people that yell louder are the minority of the people that feel that way in terms of what the general population would feel towards you writing a character a specific way. That doesn't mean you shouldn't be sensitive to that, but I wonder if it's just that's prevalent because those are the people that yell the loudest or get the most upset. So then we think, oh, then the entire population feels this way, when really it's not that way at all. Politics on the Writing Gals as we speak. Try not to be offensive to anybody.
It is something, I think it's terribly sad that so many writers are scared. I mean, are becoming scared. And it shouldn't be. It should be something that we're all excited to do. It's something that we all want to do. And I mean, we all have very, diverse friends. Why can't our stories be just as diverse as we experience in real life? And I would hope that people want us, to write good characters that represent a lot of diversity. So I don't know. I want the society at large to be more accepting, I think, of people writing people different than them, because that used to be a lot more accepted. It was understood that this is fiction and we have to create a world and we have to create characters to represent, that world, and they're all going to be different. It used to just be common sense, and I think common sense is being lost a lot because people are kind of overcorrecting there are some real problems out there. There are some real legitimate things that have been done and said and written that shouldn't have been done the way they were. And so I think in the process of trying to correct those, it's kind of swung too far in the other direction, to where now people are becoming more afraid to write characters of different races and religions and abilities. And so I want to see more of that in my own literature that I pick up and read. I live in a town in Arkansas that has a huge Latino population and a huge Marshall Islander population, and a whole lot of other nationalities live in my city and go to my children's school. And writing anything that reflected anything different than that would be odd to me. And so I hope people know that, I can see and know people in real life and have real relationships with them and see how much we have in common and how much makes them unique in what they are, and use it to create a broad character and somebody that feels real, because they have so many different facets to their thing, and that's what makes them not a cardboard cutout or a stereotype. That's what makes them a human being, because there are so many different parts that make us up. So let's just build true characters.
Good. All right, the last question. Do you guys ever create a character in your mind and then save that character for a future book?
No, not really.
I do. Every once in a while. I told you guys, it feels so funny because we've talked about this before.
I know.
I do have some occasionally. I'll just have like something that just sounds like a really fun idea, and I'll just be like, I'm gonna do that someday. Like right now, one of my goals is to write about a curvy woman who considers herself to be the funny best friend who's never going to have a romance of her own and write that romance. So the funny best friend finally gets to be the heroine.
So I read this question as you created a character for a book and then you use it later on. Like I've done that where I've thought of characters too, but not where I was like, if I'm going to write a character in a book, I'm going to use that character in that book. Like I'm not going to not use it.
Yeah.
But
I think it depends. Like I read the question is like, where do you get these ideas? Like, where do they come from? And like a lot of times I do write stories around characters. Like, do you write a story based on a plot you like and plug in the characters that make it happen? Or do you come up with a character and plug a plot in that works for that character? And you know, there's always the character or plot driven story thing that rages and debates. But sometimes I do have characters that I just like, oh, that character needs a story.
Yeah, mine is always a character first, and then the story comes after that. But I don't have like a file of like all these characters that I want to use someday. Like there is like, I guess there's a couple that I'm like, I gotta write that story someday. But yeah, most of my characters lately have been from the other books that I've already written, so I have to. The characters definitely came first there.
See,
maybe
I
it's because
also
I write. Oh, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
I was gonna say maybe it's because I write a book a month that I don't really have time to think of more characters because I'm trying to. They just come into my head and they go out as fast as they come in.
See, I also want to write a fantasy with a love interest that's a cowboy because, like, I don't remember seeing that anywhere in fantasy, and I just think that would be so much fun.
That would be fun.
Yeah. So I think, you know, there are things that I want to do and that I've kind of, I don't have an actual file, but I do file them away in my brain and I like, eventually I'm going to get to that story. I'm like, yes, this is where that character goes.
Fun. All right.
Okay, so I wanted to say something really quick about the previous question. I think what happens in this day and age is just really fast, and it's just the gospel according to Amy. That I would run away from anybody who says that you absolutely cannot do something. And that really bothers me when I hear other authors tell other authors, you can't do that. Do not do it. Because I'm like, that is not what we are out to do. We are out to create, like what Michelle said, create worlds, create people. And when you say stuff like that, to me, it says you're pushing this ethnicity or group of people, whatever they are. I mean, we all fit in different molds and we're all, depending on our faith, our family, where we are we middle children? Are we older children, younger? I mean, all of those things make up who we are. And so it really bothers me when I hear authors, especially influential authors, tell people they shouldn't do something or tell other authors they shouldn't do something. So if you hear something like that, yes, you should be sensitive. Yes, you should be careful. Yes, but that does not mean you should not write the character that's in your mind that is wanting to come out. To be true to the character and to be true to yourself, because we can write of people of different ethnic. I mean, I write a guy and a girl. I'm not a guy. I don't know how a guy thinks, but I write one, and I think it helps add to my story. So just be very careful. And then you yourself, I try hard not to tell authors that they cannot do something either, because who am I to tell them they can and can't do something? So just be careful in either direction.
Agreed. All right. Do we have any questions from our listeners?
Somebody asked where you like to people watch, Victorine. You left them hanging.
Oh, I thought.
Oh, no, you wrote.
I go to the mall, or I watch people when we go out to eat, because we go out to eat a lot.
Yeah, me too. Or at like the park, because I'm a mom.
Oh yeah.
Got some.
I always wish I had like a notebook around to like write down the words that people are like, or things people are saying around me, so that I can remember them and put them in.
I put them in my phone, in my note app. Sometimes I'm like, oh, that would be awesome.
It wasn't until recently, and I was going through some interesting personal issues, that I really wanted to write a character that I could write just like the person that was giving me problems, just so I could kill them off.
Think about
all the people in your life that you could do that. You're like, I'm going to base this character off that person, and I'm going to kill him off.
Sometimes I will see a person and then make up like a backstory about him. Is that weird?
I do that. We're writers, of course we do that.
I'm like, that person's mother abandoned them.
That's great.
Someone also asked, and I already answered it on the feed, but they wanted to know if the Midwest Conference was held in Kansas City every year. And it has been held there every year since its inception. The actual venue has changed a couple times, but it has been in Kansas City every year. And I think, I don't know how old that conference is, but I know it's at least 6 years old, and I think it's a few years older than that even. I have gone the last 3 or 4 years, and it was, a few years before that when it got started. So, yep, Kansas City. So just put it on your calendar every year, even if you can't go this year. Just think, okay, when am I going to get to Kansas City? Because it's a great conference.
It is.
Really, really good job with it.
I agree.
So there's not a whole lot of questions tonight, just lots of really awesome comments. So when you guys, if you are not watching this video live, I think you should still be able to read all the good commentary on the side by clicking on it. So enjoy it because there's a lot of fun going on over there. Thanks
All right.
everyone who's there watching it tonight and commenting. We love it.
Yes, thank you for coming. Next week, we are going to be talking about bad author practices, things that you should not do as an author, mistakes that we've seen authors make, and then huge, horrible things happen to them. So we will be giving you all the cautionary tales of what not to do. And I will probably not be with everybody next week because I will be at RWA. And I am super excited. So if you're going to RWA, come say hi to me. I can't wait to meet everybody there.
And Victorine's going to give us a long list of things not to do so that we can be sure and give you all of Victorine's.
And the top of the list would be ditch your podcast members, go to a conference. That would be the person that we discuss in detail.
That's right.
And shame anyone who has done that.
Since I'm the main repeat offender, I'm missing the podcast. I'm not saying anything. Go have fun, Victorine.
It'll be Judy because she's the only one that's been there consistently.
That's right.
Yeah, I don't go anywhere.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for hanging out with us, gals, late, and we will see you next week.